there's one thing I can safely say about this movie is that it is in fact not bogus. Welcome back to my very brief series reviewing the Bill and Ted movies. With the upcoming release of Bill and Ted Face the Music, I wanted to lead up to it with reviews of the first two movies, especially because I've never seen them before. I already reviewed the first movie, Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, and I'll leave a link to that in the description in case you missed it. Let me know what you think of the Bill and Ted movies in the comments below, and if you're new here, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you can catch my review of Bill and Ted Face the Music as soon as it's out. But now, let's talk about Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey. Alex Winter and Keanu Reeves are back as Bill and Ted respectively, and they're getting ready for a battle of the bands, along with their fiancés, the princesses whom they rescued in the first film. And this competition is essential for them to launch their careers, which leads to the futuristic utopia molded in their image as seen in the first film. However, this becomes threatened when a man named Nomolos, played by Joss Ackland, sends evil robotic versions of Bill and Ted back to the past to kill the real Bill and Ted and ruin their chances of winning the battle of the bands. And this sends the duo on a journey through hell. Literally. This time around, it's directed by Pete Hewitt, who went on to direct Garfield the movie, which, okay. But it sees the return of writers Chris Matheson and Ed Solomon, who also co-wrote the first film as well as the third film. And while this is good, as it does hold on to the essence of our two protagonists and makes for another enjoyable movie, one thing worth noting is that there is a bit of a shift in tone compared to the first film. It's not a drastic shift, but part of what made the first movie such a blast is how such an over-the-top method is used to solve what's kind of a mundane situation. A time machine used to pick historical figures out of the past just to pass a history test. While it is supposed to save the future, there's no main villain and isn't this big battle of good versus evil. It's Bill and Ted just trying to solve this one problem by themselves. And this movie, for the most part, continues in that same spirit. I mean, it still feels over the top in a lot of regards. Like, in order to solve this particular issue, it involves Bill and Ted in hell, and part of getting out of it involves things like challenging the Grim Reaper to games of Battleship and Clue, and they also give him a wedgie at one point. So it's still really silly, and you get a lot of good laughs from it. But this time around, there is an actual villain who sends murderous robots to kill Bill and Ted. So because the stakes are increased, it requires the movie to take itself a little more seriously than the last film did. Like, there's a scene at the beginning where Nomolos attacks a class being taught by Rufus, once again played by George Carlin, and the majority of it is played pretty straight-faced outside of like a line or two from the evil Bill and Ted robots. And truthfully, I wasn't very keen on this, but I get it. The whole point of sequels typically is to go bigger, and if this repeated the exact same structure as Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, I think a big criticism would have been that it was nothing but a stale recreation of the first movie. So it's understandable to introduce a villain and shake up the dynamic a bit. And it still ends up working out, to be perfectly clear. Even if it's not as consistent, the movie still mostly maintains the spirit of the last movie. Like, the villain's main motivation to get rid of Bill and Ted is that he thinks everything in the future is dumb. The way they talk, the air guitars, he just doesn't like it. So it still falls in line with having simplistic explanations for things the way the first movie did. I think it's a bit hit and miss in the first act, but once we get the Bill and Ted in hell, it gets a lot better. The way they casually interact with the Grim Reaper and the devil himself is hilarious. The fact that despite being in literally the worst place imaginable, they maintain their cool and have the same cheery optimism they're known for having. Like, they'll say things like, "Oh, you get a bad rap, but you're alright," while down there, it's still ridiculous, and it gets a lot of laughs. The special effects are slightly better than the first film, though still a little cheesy. The time machine isn't used as much this time around, so we're not treated to some of the same bad effects that normally accompanied it, like we always saw used in the first movie. But it's also nice to see a movie that uses practical effects rather than CGI to portray certain characters. Like, the Grim Reaper is in an actual costume with makeup, as are these two small aliens we meet called Station. It's two guys in costumes. We don't see that as often these days in movies. Now, they would all either be motion captured or digitally added in, or whatever the case. Are they the greatest costumes ever? Not necessarily, but it makes these creatures feel a little more real. And the cast is all around fine. Both Keanu Reeves and Alex Winter are once again solid as Bill and Ted. Like I said, since this movie has more serious moments than Excellent Adventure, you'll see that just a bit from them from time to time, but they're mostly their usual goofy selves. And they're also good as the robot Bill and Ted, which is essentially just the same type of performance, but they'll instead call each other Robot Bill and Robot Ted, which made me laugh, and they'll they'll know what they're doing when it comes to pushing people's buttons as opposed to the actual Bill and Ted, who don't know when they're annoying someone. So there's that. William Sadler as the Grim Reaper was also great. I thought his deadpan delivery of ridiculous lines like talking about Clue and Battleship were very funny, and he played off Winter and Reeves well. Joss Ackland as the villain was not bad, but he's really not in the movie that long. Even though he's the guy behind the Bill and Ted robots, he's really only seen at the very beginning and at the end. Same goes for George Carlin. His role here is even more minimal than it was in the first movie, and he was barely in that. It was okay though. Either way, it rounded out the cast well. Overall, this was a solid sequel. Is it as good as Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure? No. The fact that it makes a slight tonal shift was necessary, but it also wasn't its strongest element. But it's still funny, it maintains the goofy nature that made the first movie so enjoyable, it has plenty of ridiculous concepts, and is boosted by another fun pairing of Keanu Reeves and Alex Winter, making it a fun time. Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey gets a 7 out of 10. Glad I finally got to check both these movies out. They were fun. Bill and Ted Face the Music's out next weekend. I'll have my review for that out as quickly as I can then. Plus I have a big series I'm starting next week, along with more 2020 reviews coming soon. So let me know, did you see Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey, or are you planning to see it, and what were your thoughts? Did you like it more than the first movie, less than the first movie, and what's your favorite sequel of all time? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please like it and share it, and for more movie reviews and film discussion, please make sure to hit that subscribe button to stay updated. Thanks for watching, everyone. I'll catch you next time.